Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. We got an awesome show for you guys today. I'm going to kick things off talking all things Tennessee football. I'm going to start with a little bit of insight into the backup quarterback room for Tennessee following Nico Iamaleava and what that looks like with Gaston Moore, Jake Merklinger, and why fans should actually stop worrying this summer about how Tennessee's depth looks there at backup quarterback behind Nico Iamaleava for the 2024 college football season. We also got Matt Green, fellow University of North Georgia alumni, coming on the show as he does every Sunday night for the Monday show here, where we are going to talk about the main character for all the SEC East, now defunct, no SEC, but no longer the East and West divisions here in the conference, and now Texas and Oklahoma officially in there. But we talk about the main characters for all of those SEC schools plus Texas. We'll add Oklahoma for the West in next week's show, but we talk about all the big dogs and who we think will end up being the most talked about, the most important figure for those schools, whether good, bad, what have you. James Pearce, Nico, we talk Trevor Etienne, Oscar Delp, all kinds of big names, Brady Cook, DJ Lagway at Florida, Eugen Wilson at Florida. But yeah, there's a lot we covered here on this edition of the program as well, with Matt Green talking all things college football, and then some Georgia insight from him as a big Georgia guy as well, and where they're at recruiting and some other things with EA Sports, College Football 25, and all that good stuff. So always great to check in with fellow University of North Georgia alumni Matt Green on this show as well. But don't forget, folks, if you are not already, hit that subscribe button on your preferred podcast player. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit that like and thumbs up button there. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. Helps other people find the show, and it helps this very show to continue to grow. If you're listening to us on Apple, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcast, make sure you leave us a 5-star rating and a review on your preferred podcast player. It helps other people find the show, and it helps this very show continue to grow. So please do that if you have not already. This is a daily National Tennessee volunteer sports show that we do each and every day here. And all right, let's jump into today's episode.
The Chase Thomas Podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
Hey y'all, let's jump right into the start of today's episode. So before we get into my conversation with Matt Green and talking all things college football, I wanted to start off today's episode to talk about some Tennessee stuff. So one of the things that I've noticed this summer, and I wrote about it over on TPL Tennessee, where I am the senior editor covering all things Tennessee. So for all my Tennessee subscribers and watchers and everybody else, make sure you're locked in on the TPL Tennessee page. But I think one of the things that's most interesting in talking with Tennessee folks here locally in Knoxville and nationally, this, that, and the other, is the questions behind Nico Iamaleava, the 5-star quarterback, sophomore or redshirt freshman coming into this upcoming football season here at Tennessee. There's a lot of excitement, and rightfully so, in terms of what Nico is going to mean for this football team. He's maybe the most hyped Tennessee quarterback since Peyton Manning. All signs to this point have been great. He was excellent in the bowl game, the Citrus Bowl against Iowa. Like, the vibes are extremely good when it comes to where Tennessee is at with Nico Iamaleava going into this upcoming college football season. The Heisman odds are high. The win-loss total betting odds are high. The schedule is really nice for Tennessee this year. But one of the things that people are a little bit concerned about, I think, is what it looks like behind them. And I think the last 2 cycles, a lot of college football, or a lot of Tennessee fans in particular, have really wanted to see Tennessee add some sort of big name journeyman quarterback to kind of back up, whether it was Joe Milton or back up Nico Iamaleava this season. But what you're seeing is that's just hard in the nature of the modern college football landscape, with the transfer portal and just how many options available for a lot of these guys, and so many teams all around the country desperate for quality quarterback play. it's hard to hoard multiple quarterbacks that can play at an elite level on one roster. And I think one of the things that kind of can be frustrating if you're a fan of a team like Tennessee, or you're really close, like the roster is really good across the board, but you're worried in some areas with depth of like, what happens if this happens? And that's where we're at in the offseason. We're here now in July, and a lot of folks are like, okay, well, what if Nico gets hurt? Then where does Tennessee turn? Well, here's the thing. Texas and Georgia are the exceptions in the sport right now in this regard, where in Texas, you have Arch Manning going into his second season in Austin behind Quin Ewers. If Quin Ewers, who has been banged up the last 2 years at Texas, like if he gets banged up again this year, then you have a theoretically great alternative. We haven't seen Arch Manning play. We don't know what Arch Manning is going to be as a college football quarterback. The track record with the Manning family is pretty good. So you feel pretty good if you're Steve Sarkisian and company, but you still don't know. It also is going to be hard because ultimately Texas has college football playoff aspirations. They have a roster that can win the title. They're in the blue chip ratio. They are right there in the top tier, the big four going into this year with Oregon, Georgia, and Ohio State. So they're in their own orbit where they have both quarterbacks that you feel really good about. If something happens to Quinn, whatever, that you can turn to Arch in the season, and the expectations and the belief and all the magical components of a magical season are still in play. But if you're also Georgia, like they lose Carson Beck finally the last couple of years, it's been, how is Georgia able to keep Carson Beck, Stetson Bennett, Brock Vandagriff, Gunnar Stockton? And then this offseason you thought, okay, well, it's finally happening. Georgia's dealing with the modern ramifications of just the transfer portal and where college football is, and Brock Vandagriff transfers to Kentucky. But then Jaden Rashada, late in the game, he ends up former 4-star quarterback coming in from Arizona State. Obviously, there's the Florida story, this, that, and the other, but it's a big deal because it's another guy that, like, he played limited amount of time at Arizona State, but he's a super talented guy. You feel good about Gunnar Stockton if you're Georgia. There's just a lot of guys that are coming in to the fray here. And Georgia, like Carson Beck, should have a great final year at Georgia. It was a big deal to get him back. But again, Georgia and Texas are kind of in their own orbit in this regard, where when it comes to exceptional depth at the quarterback position, that's just not the case for the majority of college football teams, even the big time college football programs like Tennessee. So that's one part of why I think Tennessee fans might sometimes get a little bit nervous about the depth, is that there are some schools, a select few, but there are some that have maybe a little bit more comfortable depth behind their star quarterbacks at their universities. But I also wonder, as an NFL guy and an Atlanta Falcons guy, do NFL fans, like if you're an NFL fan listening to this, do you actually worry about this in the offseason? Do you worry about the depth behind you? Like Falcons obviously drafted Michael Penix, and the fans were mad that you had two quarterbacks that you have. And obviously this is not a apples to apples comparison with the NFL and college football, but it's hard enough getting one franchise quarterback in the NFL. It's hard enough to just find your Patrick Mahomes, find your Trevor Lawrence, find your big time guy. Like it's just you're maybe like Packers fans, they hope it's Jordan Love. Like it's not normal to be able to go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers and to maybe Jordan Love up there in Green Bay. But I think once you have that franchise guy in the NFL and you're an NFL fan, you feel great. Like Buffalo Bills fans the last couple of years have gone into every season like, who knows what can happen. Maybe some years they feel better than others, but after the longest time, they have a franchise quarterback. They have their next star for years and years to come, hopefully, in Josh Allen. So they're not really worried about who's backing up Josh Allen. Colts fans, when they had Peyton Manning, they weren't worried about Curtis Painter, Jim Sorgi, what have you. It's just a college thing is what I've noticed. It's a Tennessee fans where it seems like they might be a little bit extra nervous about what it looks like behind Nico Iamaleava. Maybe it's because he hasn't played yet and you're outside of the bowl game at Iowa, is why there's a little bit of concern there with the depth behind Tennessee. If he runs a lot, because he ran a lot in the bowl game, like what happens if Nico gets hurt for a couple games and they have to go to Gaston or they go to Jake or whoever they go in that regard. The thing is, this is you have the franchise guy. You have this all talent and Nico coming into the fold. Like, that's what your focus should be on, because if something, God forbid, happens to Nico, or he misses some time, or this, that, and the other, then like everything's going to change no matter what. Like, that's how it's going to be for the majority of NFL teams. Like the Buffalo Bills, if they lose Josh Allen for an extended period of time, the season changes drastically. When the Colts lose Peyton Manning, when the Patriots lost Tom Brady, like the season changes no matter what. Like, you can feel good about a backup quarterback, but ultimately, if your star guy, your franchise guy goes down, or you don't have, like, it's just, the season's going to be drastically different no matter what. So I understand the feeling of like wanting to have stacked depth in every position at your school. Quarterback's one of the hardest to stack that depth in the current college football climate, but I also just don't think it matters as much as a lot of folks might seem to worry about it. Especially with who we think might be the best team in college football this year, where they don't even have a definitive quarterback one. We think it's going to be Will Howard, but Kyle McCord obviously did not work out last year for Ohio State. We'll see what Chip Kelly brings to the fold at Ohio State, but they have no idea what they have in their quarterback room right now. It could be Devin Brown. It could be Will Howard, but we'll see. We'll see if Ohio State is able to figure it out there. If Nico is a Heisman quarterback, there's just no way an injury or something to that effect that happens to Nico doesn't drastically change Tennessee's ceiling regardless. So when this question comes up about the quarterback depth behind Nico and frustration from fans about not being able to get a veteran junior, senior guy who's bounced around a little bit, like I guess a Casey Thompson is the best example of this, who I don't even know where he's at. I think he's at School 4. What I think is so interesting is that, like, that's just, if Nico's a Heisman guy, part of the reason that it's hard to bring in somebody this offseason to back up Nico as a junior, senior, Casey Thompson type is like, there is growing belief, and it's like what Nico can ultimately be at Tennessee. Nico is a Heisman potential guy. So you should just feel good. Focus on feeling good that you have this super talent at quarterback in Nico Iamaleava that schools all over the country would love to have. Like, you're in a great situation. You have the guy, you have the 5-star, you have this all talent who's going to be your quarterback, hopefully, for the next 2 years. Yeah, depth is not going to be what you want behind him because of that, but you still got George McIntyre, 5-star coming in, commit right now, going into next year. You're going to have young depth. You still have Jake Merklinger, who extremely talented freshman, true freshman coming in here this year. Gaston knows the offense. He's been with Heupel forever. He's going to be solid. I think the way I look at it is I think fans want to feel good about everywhere because Tennessee's got depth at receiver. They've got depth at running back. They've got extreme amount of depth on the defensive line. I think they have a lot of depth at linebacker. I think they're going to have depth at corner this year. I think there's depth in a lot of areas, but I think fans just feel better about having, specifically in the college game, having at least another guy, another veteran behind their guy. And they also can look around because it's a hyper competitive sport. Like, if you're a Tennessee fan, you're keeping up with what Georgia's doing too, if you're a super fan. So you see that Georgia's able to keep some of these guys. You see that Texas has Arch waiting in the wings behind Quin Ewers, but it's like, that's a rarity. And it's also like, if Nico is who all scouts have looked at, and Nico is this big Bryce Young type and is a Heisman type quarterback for the next 2 years at Tennessee, you're not going to be thinking about the depth. Like, that's just not going to come up because depth matters more in the trenches when you rotate. Like, the quarterback position, you don't want to rotate. This is not running back where Tennessee is rotating a lot. This is not what you want to do. Like, this is going to be the Nico show, hopefully, for the next 2 years here in Knoxville. And if that's the case, the quarterback depth behind him really doesn't matter. Michigan right now, it's uncertain. We don't know who their starter is going to be. Notre Dame, if Riley Leonard doesn't stay healthy, like, it's a drastically different season for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Like, they could go undefeated this year. Schedule looks good, but if they need Riley Leonard healthy, or the whole season's different. But fans can't freak out about the depth behind Riley Leonard because you brought in Riley Leonard as a transfer to get you over that hump. Like that's the season is what Riley Leonard is for Notre Dame is a big deal. Dylan Gabriel, the same way. Been in college forever, been really good at Oklahoma, at UCF. He's got to be great at Oregon for them to win the title and, reach that next level for Dan Lanning in Oregon and maybe potentially win the Big Ten. But they're going to be going right up there against Ohio State, Michigan, and the Penn State and the big boys up there. But if Dylan Gabriel gets banged up, Dante Moore, he played a little bit last year, but do you feel great if you're a Duck fan that he's ready to go and he's going to be able to get where Dylan Gabriel might be able to get your team going into this college football season? Like next year, you hope he's the guy. This year, you still really need Dylan Gabriel to stay healthy. Tennessee needs Nico Iamaleava to stay healthy. Georgia needs Carson Beck to stay healthy. You look all across the college football landscape. That's what needs to happen. Brady Cook has to stay healthy at Mizzou. It's just the nature of the beast. So this is my way of saying, Tennessee fans, if you're worried about the depth behind Nico Iamaleava coming into the 2024 college football season, don't really worry about it. Like it's a good spot. You are in an enviable spot across the college football landscape, and just enjoy it. Like this should be a really fun season, but don't overthink the quarterback depth behind Nico. There are other position groups that depth is definitely something that is going to be paramount, specifically on the offensive line. Tennessee really needs some guys to pop there behind the starters this season. But depth at quarterback, like that's not one to freak out about, especially when you have somebody as talented as Nico Iamaleava under center going into this year. All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me down there in Decatur, Georgia, my good friend, fellow University of North Georgia alumni, Matt Green. Matt, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, sir. It's good to be back with you.
Good to be back, man. Back in our Sunday night. I mean, we've only got 2 months basically, almost exactly until college football is back. We got like basically a month exactly until fall camp is here. But college football will be here before you know it. People are mad. Like I'm mad at Phil Steele this week. He's got Tennessee at like 24. Some preposterous teams in front of him. Shout out to Phil Steele. Look, come on the pod. I would love to chop it up and decipher how some of these schools, like some schools that Tennessee just beat, like Iowa, are right there in front of the Tennessee Volunteers to kick things off. But that is neither here nor there, Matt Green. We're in go time, man. The recruiting dead period kicking off here in July, and this is the toughest month I think to get through in the college football calendar, right? Like the final month before fall, because like even though there's no in August, you still have fall camp, and you're seeing the videos of pads, you see the practice work. There's just like, oh, you feel it. Like August, you still feel like we're right there. July is tough, man, because sports are basically over outside of Major League Baseball, and it's just hard. Like we're in it's hot. It's like 100 degrees.
It definitely is. I actually went to the Braves game on Saturday, the Freed-Skeens matchup. Adam Duvall with the walk-off single. But maybe he got a double for that. It wasn't the gap. He kept running. I hope he got his double. He needs all the help he can get with his stats right now. But yeah, I thought you were about to say it. This is peak talking season right now, man. It's talking season. That's what it is. What is SC Media Days coming up here in like a couple weeks? Like this is this is what it's all about. People having takes and people being called idiots, and then some people saying you're wrong in the comments, and some people are saying actually, he's got some good points. So it's fun, man.
It is fun. I mean, I think I saw Paul Feinbaum was interviewed and was like, Arch Manning will be the starter or something by the end of the year for Texas. Ooh. Like that was something he was throwing out, and I'm like, whew. It was hey, that's why Paul Feinbaum is the GOAT. Like he's got the conviction, because I think he said that Arch Manning was his pick to because he was asked about Arch. I want to get this quote right. So Tyler Feldman on Twitter said, I asked Feinbaum who will be the Longhorns starting quarterback by the end of their first season in the SEC. His response, that will be Arch Manning. I don't need to tiptoe around that. That is guaranteed. You heard it. It's great stuff. It's peak talking season.
Yeah. Did Quin Ewers die? Is there something I don't know about? Did he transfer again? Is he going pro?
I mean, we're
Um,
betting on him getting hurt, I guess. Like,
I
it's one of
mean,
those if yeah.
I could obviously see him getting a start, but I mean, I don't know. You gotta be special to come in like and start and just completely take the job from a guy like Quin Ewers. Like he's not like, some sort of generational talent, but he's one of the better quarterbacks in all of college football this year. He's pretty proven. So I don't know. Arch Manning's obviously 5-star, like, number one player in the country for a reason, but I don't know. And I guess if you're just banking on an injury, that's what would lead the way.
Yeah, and I've always looked at it like you and I talked about it, where it's like they see the 5-star stuff, and I'm like, Quinn was a higher regarded quarterback. Like, I think Quinn actually has more. It's just kind of funny because it's just feels like forever ago. But Quinn
Yeah,
Ewers, Texas
prospect
fans, be excited about
ranking
Quinn
wise,
Ewers.
he was like the
Why does
highest
Quinn
rated
Ewers get talked about this way?
he was like the highest rated quarterback ever or something, right?
Yeah,
Quinn Ewers, like higher than like Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, like so obviously he's got his own accolades as well. I mean, you'd probably say he's not that good like he's still very good, but in terms of like the greatest quarterback prospect ever, I would say he hasn't lived up to that billing. So who knows? There's a chance Arch Manning is better, but I don't know. I'm pretty sold on Quinn Ewers going into 2024 as the starter.
yeah, same here.
But he has obviously missed time each of the last 2 seasons.
For sure. Well, Matt Green, we're gonna do a who will be the main character this season for the SEC now defunct East division here in the SEC. I wanted to break it up a little bit, but we also mixed in one of the new Big 12 arrivals in Texas and Oklahoma. So we'll add Texas on this week and have Oklahoma on next week. But I thought it'd be a fun exercise in the SEC specifically. The main characters, which was kind of like outlining, like, hey, when it could be a positive, it could be a negative, but this player, I even had a coach for one of mine because of capital R reasons. And I think this would be a fun exercise to kind of get who you think is going to have the biggest impact and how their particular season goes for their school, because I think we're going to have some different answers here. And I think it's just going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because I think there's some new faces, some returning faces, some familiar faces, but it kind of, I thought for me, it was helpful and instructive in kind of outlining ceilings, floors of teams, where things are going to go, how much they need player X or Y, and this, that, and the other, because it is talking season. But I thought it would be fun because it's also like kind of a prediction on who the media will be most focused on from this team. Like, who will this player will get the most attention this season. He'll be the main guy for my House of Dragon folks, the Rhaenyra of this college football season for their respective teams. I thought that'd be fun. But before we get into the main dish here, Matt Groom, we have I gave you 2 last week, so I feel like I should overlook this week because Matt Green was awarded somehow 2 Dog Bites segments on one Tennessee program. So, sir, what do you have for us on the Georgia front this week?
On the Georgia front, sir, I think we just need to go ahead and schedule the parade, start engraving the trophy, maybe even build Kirby a statue, because EA Sports said that Georgia is the number 1 team in college football. They're the best offensive team in the country. They're tied for the best defensive, or no, they're tied for the best offensive team, second best defensive team on the game, only behind Ohio State. And I'm thinking, if EA Sports says it, they're a 95 overall. It's as good as gold. Go ahead and etch it in stone. It's gonna happen. EA Sports said so. Georgia's the best team in the country.
Wow. Are you gonna play the game? Have you decided?
Well, I don't currently own a console, sir. So that will be. But it's honestly, after NCAA stopped coming out of games, that's like when I stopped playing video games. Like, FIFA's fun and all, but like, I just haven't had my own console in years. But the NCAA football video game, that might be enough to make me pull the trigger.
Do you have a conversation with the wife here? Do you go, hey, we're gonna
I do what I want, sir. All right. I call the shots. All right. So if I want it, I'm getting it.
Wow. He's just going for it. It's Matt
Just speak
Green's
that into
just
existence.
yeah, there you go. But do you think
Run
it's
it by Marissa first?
There you go. Man, I don't know. It is funny to me to see like we're close in age with a lot of college football media. Matt Green, like we kind of all grew up together and seeing the different writers and folks who I would not have guessed would get like up in arms about EA Sports video game stats and who the number like the Tennessee message boards were really mad about Tennessee's EA Sports College Football 25 offensive rankings, and there were teams ahead of him in the offense, and I'm like, y'all, I don't know. I look at it and then I keep moving on with my day where I don't, it doesn't faze me. It's amazing how much, even the broader point here is that you and we've been gone from consoles and video games for maybe a decade plus, on my end for sure. And I wonder how many of the folks who are so upset about these college football game stats, it's like, do you own a console? What are you mad about? Like, you're mad that EA Sports didn't agree and didn't give the right proper ranking for your team? Like, why are you letting this affect your Tuesday, man? What are we doing?
One fan base that should be up in arms. It is Tennessee. Like, not a top 25 offense or top 25 defense. Like, Tennessee might not finish top 25 this year. Like, that's a possibility. Like, they go like 8-5 or something like that. But it'll be because they lost to like really good teams. From like a power rating perspective, they'll probably still be like at worst of top 15, top 20 team. You know what I mean? Like, they are a talented team. They're going to play a really tough schedule and play a bunch of teams that are on this list better than them. But it's a terrible call to not have Tennessee either top 25 offense or defense, and also to have Colorado to be tied for like the 15th, 16th best team on the game. Like, what are we doing here? Like, because they have Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, like, I don't know. It feels like pro Dion propaganda. I don't know. Did they pay money to EA Sports?
I don't know, man. It doesn't faze me. I don't care. It's fine. But I'm glad Georgia fans got something else to be excited about in the upcoming college football season, Matt Green. I'm glad you guys have something else to get you excited about. But also, I don't know, can Kirby spin this?
EA Sports. This is gospel. It's, what EA says goes. If it's in the game, it's in the game.
Wow. How does Kirby spin this though to 7-5? How do you spin this into some rat poison? How do you spin the EA Sports gamers really, really loving the Dogs going into this year?
That's a good question. That's an obstacle that no one's had to deal with in college football in recent years. So, who knows? I heard one guy talking about, like, when some Call of Duty game came out a few years back, like, it was like a legit problem in their locker room. It's like, too many players are playing this video game. It's like, this could be something. Like, there could be teams that can't control how much these guys are on this NCAA video game. But I don't know. It's just going to be a lot of fun. Like, I was excited just for the idea of the game coming out, because the best part about the college video game, because you remember back in the day, they'd be quarterback number 12 and nobody would have a name. People would be online and like do the whole rosters. You could do a whole thing. There's a whole community for it. But so as the further you went on in the dynasty, then the recruits started to have names and like it became cool, and you were recruiting and all that. So I was just thinking about doing all that stuff again, not even really thinking about the actual likeness of the current players in the game. And so that's like an aspect that's never been there with the college football game, of actually having Travis Hunter, this two-way playmaker and stuff like that, with these attributes that different players have, like, field general and stuff like that. So it sounds like it's going to be pretty cool. So I'll have to get it on my list.
Okay. There you go. Matt Green, is there another dog bites you have this week? Am I giving you double dog bites in back-to-back weeks on a Tennessee program? Is that what's happening here?
That is what's happening, sir. That was just a little bite, a little crumb. But I feel like in the summer right now, we need to do a recruiting update every week, and no like huge, well, as far as we know, no huge recruits this week, but 2 3-star wide receiver commits. Georgia got Landon Roldan and Tyler Williams. But both these guys 3 stars. And so you look at Georgia's always signing all these 5-star prospects. It's like that's what's sexy, right? People love the 5-star prospect. But you look at Georgia's like recent history of signing 3-star wide receivers, and this is what's got to get you excited. Like there's still a couple in like the 2023, 2022 class that are unproven. But you had in 2022, you had Dylan Bell, who's a current, probably the best receiver on Georgia's team, I would say, the second best. You had A.D. Mitchell was a 3-star receiver back in 2021. And then Ladd McConkey was a 3-star receiver back in 2020. So, like, these have been big-time receivers and currently are. Dylan Bell, a big-time receiver for Georgia, and they're getting him at a 3-star. So I know Sokovi White is a smaller, like, one of those shifty type receivers. That was a 3-star coming into this class. Like he could potentially be one of those game breakers. But I know just because of the appearance, Landon Roldan is definitely going to have some Ladd McConkey comparisons. But this guy supposedly ran like a 4.37, I think, at Georgia's camp. You know, I don't know if it was a laser who was timing him, if that's official, but just prove that this guy does have speed. And so it's interesting. Like these guys might not like move the meter on the national like recruiting rankings, but you've seen Georgia have some pretty productive 3-star receivers.
Yeah, I mean, it's Tyler Williams. It depends on where you're looking because he's gotten some 4-star buzz too. But I think it's an interesting class right now because do we record before or after the CJ Wiley stunner to Florida State?
Yeah, that was the day we recorded the day of.
Okay. So CJ Wiley was a big target there, obviously, but everyone thought it was down to LSU and Georgia, and then it ends up being Florida State. And then we'll see on the other big fish here, Derek Meadows, who is a Bishop Gorman kid, who I think the favorite is Notre Dame, if I'm not mistaken, but I think Georgia's in that, Bama, I'm sure, and some other ones. But I'm curious how this all unfolds because Georgia's losing a lot of receivers. A lot of their transfers are out of eligibility after this year. So you look at it, have you already started looking at the room next year? Because even if you load up, if you're Georgia with Talon Taylor, you don't get CJ Wiley, maybe you get Meadows, maybe not, but you get Thomas Blackshear. He seems more of like the wild card, do it all kind of guy. Landon, you talked about Roldan out of North Oconee, speedster, Tyler Williams. Like you have dudes, you're stacking receivers in this class, and it could have been up to 6 at one point. It looked like maybe it still can for Georgia, but I'm very curious what they do. I mean, I guess they're going to have to hit the portal hard no matter what because of what they're going to lose. But I don't know. When you look at the Georgia receiver room going into next year, are you already forecasting how this all works with all these with the influx of freshmen that are going to come in? Because clearly Georgia has prioritized adding as many receivers in the 25 class as possible.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you're going to just continue to see them hit the portal. I think they're going to, I mean, you look at, so who do they have right now? So Dom Lovett and Ra Thomas are both in their final season. With COVID
London
and everything,
Humphreys, I think, is gone.
I can't keep track of everybody, but Dylan Bell is in his 3rd year, I want to say. Yeah, so he's not necessarily a leave early for the draft guy, but I think he definitely could have that type of season.
But Arian Smith is gone. Colby Young is gone.
Is Colby Young definitely not
I think he's a senior.
Year? Okay.
He's a senior. I think the COVID year is gone. Isn't the COVID year gone after this year?
I can't keep track of it, to be honest. But so I think if he's got 1 year, I know London Humphreys, the Vanderbilt transfer, that's a guy we haven't even seen play for Georgia. I know he has multiple years.
Michael Jackson is gone after this year, I think.
Is that right? Okay. So, I mean, you're probably going to see Georgia continue to hit the portal. Like maybe some of these current, freshmen and sophomores, but, turn into something. But that's the beauty of the portal. Like we thought the portal was going to be like so many of the rule changes. We think these rule changes are going to, level the playing field, kind of be the equalizer. But it's like, no, once the big dogs figure out a way to do it, like they're always going to get the best out of it. It's like Moneyball. Like once everyone figured out the A's playing Moneyball, it's like, oh, now the Yankees are just playing Moneyball, and then they can pay someone when they want to. It's like you look at the transfer portal, like that was kind of the only chance that some teams had was, well, yeah, Georgia might have a down year where they're losing a lot of receivers, but because of the portal, they have one hole on their team and they can fill it through the portal, and they're not really penalized from maybe a couple down recruiting classes. And like you've seen Alabama, like some of the best playmakers on their teams in recent years have been guys, out of the portal. It's like, what is Alabama's team without Jamison Williams in 2021 or Jahmyr Gibbs in 2022? Like those are some big time playmakers. Jermaine Burton the past couple years. So, that's like it's like it was advertised as one of these things that's gonna help the little guy, and I guess it's gonna help the player more than anything. But yeah, you're seeing the biggest teams are gonna figure out a way to not have a weakness at that position.
I just think it's interesting because every team builds differently, right? Like, and I think they prioritize different parts of their roster. Because like, look at Georgia. Like, I mean, Jurasek was kind of a surprise. They went to the portal for a tight end because they've recruited so well there. I mean, he's going to play a lot, and I think he's going to be good for them. But I mean, you still have Lawson Lucky there. You still have Jaden Riddell coming in, who's a big get. Like, you become this factory that like you don't really have to go to the portal. It's just kind of like a hey, why not situation. I wonder because I mean, quietly they're I shouldn't say thin, but I mean Nathan Frazier I think is going to be a dude for them. But you got the two Robinsons. We'll see if Etienne's back next year. It probably depends on what he does this year. Cash Jones will be there as long as Georgia lets him, and Cash Jones is going to flip a game, man.
I would think in Etienne's mind, he's one good season and going to the NFL.
Yeah, but I just wonder how Georgia continues to prioritize the portal, because if you look at defense, guess what? Their entire defense is in-house guys. And if you look at their recruiting, it's like Georgia is prioritizing develop, and then they go to the draft, and the guys who sat behind those guys for 2 years or a year, whatever, they step into that role, and then they're there. They're just it's just interesting that the way that Georgia is building their roster, because you just don't see transfers all over the place. But the only place you see transfers in a high regard right now at Georgia is receiver. And I just wonder if that is by design. I wonder if that continues going in year over year. I don't know, because it kind of reminds me, do you remember the Patriots of Belichick? Belichick is this all-time great coach. He develops talent all across the board, and he was the de facto GM. And then he drafts receivers like Chad Jackson. You have those guys where it never works. He could not draft receivers to save his life. And then you have the Steelers over there who they just walk into stars. Like whoever the Steelers draft, you just could assume was going to be a good receiver.
Round wide receiver is a stud.
Yeah, this doesn't matter. He's going to be good. And you're just like, why is it this way? And I just wonder if Georgia is kind of like Belichick with the Patriots, where they're like, look, it's not really, I mean, Pickens obviously a big hit for them, but I wonder if Georgia is just like we're really cooking everywhere else. Like, let's just go to the portal here. Like that's our portal zone is. We're gonna replenish our receiver room every year with portal guys, but we're gonna stay at the high school ranks and draft and sign, commit, develop everywhere else. And that's just where we emphasize the portal is just in the receiver room, so we don't have to deal with that. I don't know if that's the case, but I think it's interesting.
Knowing Kirby Smart, I think he's always wanting to build through high school. Like, I think that's always the way he wants to do it. But if a position needs help, he's going to go to the portal to help that position. I would say, and this just being speculation on my part, I think it's just kind of narrative driven. And you look at Georgia, traditionally, Georgia is a run first offense, right? Georgia hasn't had a 1,000-yard receiver since 2002 with Terrence Edwards. So, and now you have Georgia, the last 3 years has actually had one of the better offenses and one of the better passing games in the country. And a tight end has led them in receiving each year. And so I don't know, maybe if you're a receiver, you can't see the vision. You're like, oh, well, they gave the ball to that tight end. You shouldn't. I'm a wide receiver. Do they not know how to feed wide receivers? And it's like, no, that was the best player on the team, so they fed him the rock. And I think that's what Georgia's kind of become the last couple of years, doing a better job of getting their best playmakers the ball a lot. And so Georgia's just a team that's never kind of had those guys with big stats. They just always, and that's even like a Mark Richt thing. Like, I don't know what it is. They just seem to kind of balance, have like 4 or 5 guys with 30 or so catches. But I think you look at like George Pickens, he could have potentially had that big season, right? But his junior year, he tears his ACL and only plays a couple games. So you haven't actually seen a Georgia receiver have those big stats. So I think when you're recruiting out of high school, like, not like generalizing like wide receivers, but we kind of know what big time receivers are, at least in the NFL, kind of have that diva quality. Like if I'm a high schooler, I kind of want to go to the place I can put up the biggest stats and I can, make the biggest name for myself. And Georgia's a place, for whatever reason, hasn't really produced the most elite wide receivers. So, if you want to put up stat, it seems like each Georgia receiver you kind of talk about, like a Marcus Rosemy-Jack saying, like you hype up how good of a blocker he is, and then he's also a good, just balanced, not like a necessarily great deep threat, but he was just kind of good at everything, right? He might be on an NFL roster for a few years, but that's the kind of guys that Georgia has had in recent years. Like Ladd McConkey is, that, and I guess he was drafted higher than George Pickens was. So Pickens is a different case. Like that would have been Georgia's guy. So that's kind of an unfortunate miss there, I guess, from a receiver like sales pitch perspective. But I think that's what it is at the end of the day. Just by my speculation, is just high school recruits want to see those guys with the big stats. They want to see Brian Thomas with 17 touchdowns. Like they want to do that. And Georgia just has not necessarily had that guy.
Yeah. Well, Matt Green, I think the Dogs will be okay, is my hunch. The Dogs will be okay. I don't think they're going to have a number one class though this time. The way I'm looking at it and the way that it's going to unfold here over the next month, I think they are still in play for it, but I don't think right now I would lean. Who's on a surge that really might end up with a number one class, which would be Chris Marlar's just all-time great scenario is Alabama closing strong here, getting Dijon Lee and then Caleb Cunningham, number 2 receiver. I mean, maybe they could still add Jamie French. I don't know. Like Alabama is closing hard here. It's kind of scary that the Alabama Crimson Tide are on a little hot streak here at the end of June.
I always said Alabama wouldn't miss a beat. Kalen DeBoer.
That's what I've always said.
I had no doubts ever.
Well, Matt Green, let's get into our theme of the night here in who will be the main character of these particular college football SEC East, now defunct SEC East. And I think, doesn't Texas and Oklahoma come in officially at midnight here? Aren't they officially SEC teams at midnight tonight?
July 1st. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. So we're here.
Yeah. It's official.
It is official. So first up, a team that we've talked about here at the top of the show here, Matt Green, the Georgia Bulldogs. So who, in your estimation, will be the main character of the Georgia Bulldogs in the 2024 college football season?
Okay, so we'll see if we have the same definition with this exercise. But the guy I feel like, Carson Beck is obviously the face of this offense. But I feel like the guy that's going to be the catalyst this year is going to be Trevor Etienne, because you look at what Georgia's had the last couple of years, and obviously James Cook, I mean, what he's done in the NFL so far, he looks like a baller. But at Georgia, he wasn't really given that workload. Zamir White, just a solid player. Last couple of years, Dejon Edwards, Kendall Milton, Kenny McIntosh, just had a couple just real solid players at the running back position. It's been a while since Georgia kind of just had a feature back in the backfield. And I think that's what you're going to see with Trevor Etienne this year. Like, I think you're going to, like we were kind of talking with Georgia splitting out the sharing the stats. Like, I'm sure Etienne's not going to rush for 1,600 yards or something, and he might not be first team all SEC. But I do think he's a 1,000-yard rusher. I think, like you were kind of alluding to, this is not the deepest backfield for Georgia this year. So I think Trevor Etienne is going to be one of those guys that, like, the receiving play, the receivers are going to be solid. Like, you don't have Ladd McConkey, you don't have Brock Bowers, but I think how good the passing game has been the last couple of years is kind of overshadowed Georgia's running game being kind of pedestrian. Like, I mean, like, you look at the stats, like, they are, like, I think they finished 21st this past year and 19th the year before in rushing offense. Like, they've had good numbers, but I think you just, when you do the eye test, when you look at Georgia's running game, it's just left a little bit to be desired. So I think you're going to see, like, maybe they don't replace exactly what Bowers and McConkey were in the pass game, but I think with the running game being even better, that could kind of balance that out.
Interesting. I did not think you were going to go Trevor Etienne here, sir. I wonder. I think he's going to be. He's interesting too because I think there's a part of this for Carson Beck that what kind of year he has affects Carson Beck's Heisman chances, right? Like if Trevor Etienne has a really, really big time year and kind of what we were talking about at the top of the show, which is Georgia not having 1,000-yard receiver since Terrence Edwards. Like if one of these transfer receivers and or Arian Smith or whoever, Dylan Bell, they don't have like breakout all-time great, or I shouldn't say all-time great, just breakout seasons, just really, really good years for Georgia, like a George Pickens type. Does Carson Beck without Brock Bowers, who Oscar Delp should be good, but I don't like, it's just, he's not going to be Brock Bowers. Will he have enough juice around him to finish first in the Heisman and win a Heisman? If Etienne, I mean, what helps is Etienne is good out of the backfield. He'll be able to catch passes. He'll be able to help there. But I wonder how much the combination of a great season, kind of like Jahmyr Gibbs and Bryce Young 2 years ago, right? Where you couldn't really tell because Jahmyr Gibbs was doing so much because the pass catchers and guys around Bryce Young just weren't as good as what we've known with the Jalen Waddles and the Devontae Smiths and company. Like that kind of hurt Bryce because I watched Bryce Young like almost single-handedly beat Tennessee in Knoxville that night and was doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And Bryce Young was just still the engine that kept that Alabama team moving. But Jahmyr Gibbs was sensational too. And it was just, I mean, he's been good in the NFL and you see that right away. I wonder if Trevor Etienne is the same kind of transfer in. He gives this Georgia offense some more juice and steals some of the limelight because I think, I just wonder how that goes week over week between that 1-2 punch. Like it's a good thing for Georgia fans. Like you want them both to do well and to win. But I wonder how much it hurts Carson's narrative for a Heisman if Trevor Etienne is the main character for the Dogs this year.
If he's truly like the best player on the offense, like I would be surprised by that. I kind of look at Trevor Etienne being kind of like a catalyst on like just I guess more of like an X factor. Like if Trevor Etienne is like actually like one of the best running backs in the SEC, like it feels like Georgia's going to be unstoppable on offense. Like I feel confident that Carson Beck is going to be one of the best, if not the best quarterback in the conference. And you kind of know what you're getting with him. Like, he is replacing, some of the weapons at receiver, but I feel confident in what Carson Beck is going to give you, but Etienne feels like he could take the offense to the next level.
Interesting. Well, I had Oscar Delp here on my list.
Okay,
Matt Green.
Elaborate.
So it's kind of the same jokes we hear, like you talked about, like what the kid who just committed is going to get with Lad McConkey and stuff, like the 3-star that Kirby's going to put him in the Georgia lab and he's going to be really good and he's going to be a future NFL receiver, this, that, and the other. I think Oscar Delp's a good player. I think Oscar Delp is going to be good for Georgia this year. He showed some flashes last year. I think week over week, he's going to be a main character talking point on broadcasts and by Georgia fans, because I think there might be some inner Georgia fan turmoil with Oscar Delp this year. It's not because of the losses, but I think my prediction is you're going to be so annoyed by your family's discourse, your friends, like what you're seeing online. The Oscar Delp discourse at Georgia this fall, I think is going to be very, very frustrating for Georgia fans, because I think the casuals are going to be like, okay, what is this? You've become so used to the dominant like Heisman type guys, like a top 10, top 15 guy, like the Darnell Washingtons and the Brock Bowers, that Oscar Delp's gonna be fine. Hunter Yurisek's gonna be fine, but they're not gonna gobble up as just these unblockable, unguardable forces out in the perimeter, out in the flats. Like Oscar Delp's gonna be okay, but he's not gonna be Kyle Pitts. He's not gonna be Brock Bowers.
Delp's not gonna take over the Auburn game.
No, like that's not happening. That's a great point. Like Oscar Delp is not taking over a situation and bailing Carson Beck out and the offense out and a tough environment at Auburn. So I think Oscar Delp is going to be this, and it's not fair to him, but he's the guy following the best tight end in Georgia history. The guy who will never be, you're just the Brock Bowers just don't exist very often. Like it's going to be very hard to see somebody like that ever come across Stanford Stadium.
That's what I was telling you. It's going to be the curse, just like the Herschel Walker thing. Every good running back getting compared to Herschel, but we'll see. Honestly, I'm not even thinking about Yurosek. Like I forget that he's even on Georgia's team. Like that'll be the ultimate X factor, because with how Georgia's recruited, like you wouldn't think that Georgia would have needed to go to the portal with Oscar Delp and Lawson Lucky and even Jaden Riddell coming in. And I'm sure there's another big time, like a fairly highly ranked one I'm forgetting. But so Urasek, like if this guy is good enough to come in and play, then he's got to be pretty good to be better than some of those other guys. So that's another guy. You know how Georgia has liked to run these 2 tight end sets the last couple of years. But I also wonder if they run 2 tight end sets because they had Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers. Like they're not going to have those guys all the time. So I don't think they're going to run 2 tight ends as much as they were because you can't just be as honest as far as are we going to run, or are we going to pass because of how dynamic those 2 guys were. And Oscar
That's
Delp.
Fair. Well, let's go to Tennessee, Matt Green. Your main character for my Tennessee Volunteers here this year will be who?
So I think this guy is just kind of a perfect microcosm of what Tennessee football is in 2024. And that's Nico Iamaleava. Like, obviously the quarterback, most important position on the field, but it's the exact type of player he is. Like, he's obviously super talented guy, like Tennessee is talented. They're moving in the right direction, but I feel like they're still inexperienced. And I feel like Iamaleava is going to have some of those games this year where it's just like, yeah, he's a first year starter. Like that's why there's kind of a ceiling on what Tennessee can be this year, because he is a first year starter. But at times you might just see him take over games because he's got that much talent. So I think he's going to, as he goes, this Tennessee team is going to go this year. And I think that's why they probably end up, maybe they go 10-2, but probably more like a 9-3 this season.
I will say, like, it's me being super niche here to not say it's going to be Nico Iamaleava. He will be the main character. Like, this is actually, I think, the least debatable one on our list here, the SEC East teams. And look, I think a lot hinges on the ceiling for Tennessee based on what Nico is. But I think we've seen through 3 years with Heupel what the floor is, even with below average quarterback play. What you saw last year is it's still challenging for 9-10 wins. Like, Tennessee only lost 1 home game last year, and it was to an elite Georgia team that has still not lost a regular season game in years. So I look at it as just like the floor is so high that I think, yeah, I understand that Nico, all eyes will be on Nico week over week, but I think Heupel and this scheme and this offense does enough that I'm just like, Nico should be the main character against Florida. Nico should be the main character against Alabama, against Georgia, those kind of games, because that's when we'll see what he brings that will separate and potentially get Tennessee over the hump, is those weeks. Every other week, though, the main character is going to be James Pearce to me. Like, James Pearce potentially being the number 1 overall pick next year in the NFL draft, 2025 NFL draft. He didn't start last year. Like, it was still mostly Roman Harrison, and he was getting his opportunities. But like, this is going to be the first year where James Pearce is the starting Leo. He's got all the offseason attention on him. Like, he's going into this year with all kinds of just like Jadeveon Clowney type love and admiration, that I am very curious how James handles all of this, because the spotlight, I understandably on offense and Heupel and Nico, but the defensive line for Tennessee is nasty. Like, they've got dudes on dudes, whether it's Joshua Josephs, whether it's Caleb Herring, whether it's Omar Norman-Lott, Amari Thomas, Tyree West. They got dudes all over the inside and the outside here. Like, I think Tennessee's defensive line is going to be one of the best in the country, maybe the best, and it's going to be led by James Pearce. I am very curious what that means. And for the folks who are like not like fully in on the Tennessee depth chart right now, Tennessee sneakily needs James Pearce in this defensive line to wreak havoc week over week, because I think there are going to be some limitations on the back end. I'm worried about the safety spots in particular. 2 new starters on that front. If you include Starr, 3 new starters. What helps some issues in the back end is elite pass rush. An elite pass rush can hide a lot of weaknesses that you might have in other areas of the field. So I think if James Pearce is still this unblockable madman off the edge, and Tennessee's just able to rotate just unbelievable amount of edges, and then on their third down pass rush abilities where they have those 3 Leos in the game at the same time, and they're just able to obliterate more teams than not week over week. Tennessee's gonna be really good, and they just need it. Like, James Pearce is going to dominate a lot of highlights. I think he's going to have a great year, and I understand why people are going to be fascinated nationally by Nico Iamaleava and what it looks like, but people need to be prepared because James Pearce we've seen more. We know what James Pearce can be. Nico is still just one game. James Pearce, we know in where football is going, Matt Green. It's like you saw with the Georgia defensive lines over the last few years. Like, the defensive line and pass rushers are just as important as a great quarterback. Like, if you have a great pass rush, that can guide you pretty far over the course of a football season. So if Tennessee's got the best pass rush in college football next year, along with a pretty good offense, it's a scary team. That's a playoff team. That's a team that's going to win more games than they lose. So I think the main character to me is going to be the guy who probably won't be, and he might be the number 1 overall pick next year in the 2025 NFL draft.
So I think you, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you are speaking for a certain percentage of the Tennessee fan base, and maybe this is like a huge percentage of the Tennessee fan base that basically just assumes the offense is going to be like upper echelon of college football. Mm-hmm. And so the only thing you're worried about is the defense. And because if you have a good defense, then this team can go somewhere, because we're obviously going to have an elite offense. And that's just interesting to me. Coming off the year with Joe Milton, I wouldn't be as sold that like this team is going to have an elite offense every year. Obviously, the schedule is going to get a little tougher with Texas and Oklahoma coming into the SEC. So that's interesting, because I feel like that's where you're coming from. It's almost like under the assumption that the offense is obviously going to be good. So if James Pearce is this first-team All-American, number 1 draft pick, and Tennessee's an elite defense, then they're obviously going to be an elite team next year.
Absolutely. Next up here, the Mizzou Tigers, Matt Green. The main character for their 2025 college football season will be who, sir?
I'm going to have to go with the best wide receiver in college football, and that's Luther Burden. I think you saw how dynamic, not only he as a receiver, but also in the return game, also running the ball a little bit. So this guy's just got a superstar quality about him, and I think we lost a lot of big time receivers after this 2023 season. I think he is the best one in the country, and I think you're going to see him have some big time games. And I think Missouri is going to be a pretty dynamic offense this year, and he's going to be the reason why.
Okay. I get the Luther Burden part of it. I think we talked about, like, is he a sneaky, like, best non-quarterback Heisman pick going into next season? I've gone back and forth on this, but I think it's Brady Cook. And I haven't had a quarterback yet here, Matt Green, but I think it's Brady Cook, because I think people have realized he's a good player. Like, you and I talked about him, like, he was really good against Tennessee in that game. He used his legs really well. He's able to figure out, he's just quick decision maker. He's able to run the Kirby Moore, Eli Drinkwitz offense really efficiently. He's an efficient quarterback. He's been there forever. That helps. Veteran quarterbacks that are really comfortable in the system, that matters. But I just wonder, because people are talking CFP and Mizzou's schedule is pretty nice, I wonder, like, was last year the peak of Brady Cook? Like, is there another level that he can get to? Luther Burden, I think, can get to another level. I think Mizzou's got a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. I just wonder, what is his ceiling? Because Bo Nix was a former 5-star, and Bo Nix got to a different level at Oregon than he was at Auburn. I just wonder if Brady Cook, like, can he be a Heisman type guy? Can he get to the Chase Daniels of the world? Or is he pretty solid? Is he like a KJ Jefferson type, where it's like widely regarded as he's good? He's a good SEC quarterback, but I don't think he can win like 2 or 3 playoff games. I don't think he can guide Mizzou to the SEC title game and win an SEC. Like, I'm very curious week over week what Brady Cook does with these expectations, because Mizzou is going into this season with a lot of people picking them to make the CFP, maybe even make an SEC title run. I don't know. I just don't know Brady Cook is that good that he's going to be able to live up to those expectations.
Can you explain the KJ Jefferson comparison?
Well, look at KJ. He was there at Arkansas forever. And every offseason when he was at Arkansas, it was like, KJ is one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. And then you're like, okay, is he the best? And you're like, well, no, KJ is not the best. Like, we know that KJ Jefferson is not the best quarterback in the SEC, but we know he's somewhere in that 3 to 5. Most, like, that's what I mean. It's like Brady Cook, we know is not the best, but it's hard to argue against him being somewhere in that top 5. And I think that was the case with KJ Jefferson for the last few years, was that, yeah, you understood that KJ wasn't going to be the best quarterback in the conference, but it was also he had such a high floor that you were like, KJ is just solid. He puts up numbers and you look at it, it's like a lot of it's not KJ's fault that Arkansas was having the problems that they were having. I just think Brady Cook's in that same mold where it's like Brady Cook's not going to be the best quarterback in the SEC, but he does have a high floor. And I don't know. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what he can ultimately get to his final season in Columbia.
No, that's true. I don't know if I see him being a Heisman guy. Like, he's a good player. Luther Burden just seems like the kind of guy who's like almost independent on what the quarterback is doing. Like, you just find a way to get this guy the ball. If he's got a good quarterback, you can put up huge numbers. But if not, just throw him some screen passes and this guy can make some plays either way. I would be surprised if Brady Cook took that Heisman step. But I mean, I think if he's just a good quarterback, you could see Missouri, put together another 10-2 season. And with their schedule, though, if they go 10-2, I don't know that that's a top 12 team at the end of the day. Like, if they lose to Alabama and they lose to, I'm not sure who their second most difficult game is next year, but I think Alabama was the one that kind of stood out. But yeah, so I don't know how many good wins they necessarily have if they're a 2-loss team. But I mean, the stars are kind of aligned for them this year to be pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. Kentucky, Matt Green, your main character for the Kentucky Wildcats this year will be who?
I gotta go. This is like the Nico Iamaleava thing, only to like a worse extent. I feel like Kentucky will go as far as Brock Vandagriff takes them. And man, I just don't know if I'm buying that Brock Vandagriff can be this like breakout star in the SEC this year. Because I think that's what it would take for Kentucky to be like, not even like make noise, like to have a winning record, like just to win 7 games or so. Like, I think Vandagriff needs to prove, like, I think he needs to have a Brady Cook type 2023 season. And like, maybe that's a reasonable expectation for him. He's been sitting behind a couple good quarterbacks the last couple years, but I don't know. I saw Devin Leary. I felt like he was a good player, like at NC State, and I feel like he went to Kentucky and got worse. So I just don't know. Will Levis, the NFL seems to think he's great, and he didn't do too hot at Kentucky. So I don't even know what.
Well, he was good that first year at Kentucky. He was bad the second year, but he was good the first year.
Yeah, I mean, he was fine for sure. Like, I still don't understand the first round hype he was getting, or what was he ended up being the first pick of the second round or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't even know what to expect. So just for that reason, it's hard to be too like bullish on the Kentucky offense.
That's fair. There's another part of this, which is Liam Cohen left, and that last year with Will Levis was Rich Gangarello. And then last year you get Devin Leary in there and you have Liam Cohen back. And it wasn't great still. Devin Leary, that was one that I was surprised did not work because Devin Leary was really good at NC State. We haven't seen anything from Brock Vandagriff. He's a huge unknown. I do think it's interesting. Georgia fans are like, I don't know. And it's like, if he was starting day one for the Dogs this fall, you're like, Brock's a sleepy Heisman guy. Like, there's no doubt about it. Brock Vandagriff, the phone on the hip, that's a power move. Like, him already doing the dad phone hip thing. Have you seen this? Every picture I've seen with Brock Vandagriff, he's got the phone clip on his hip pocket.
Right?
Yeah, like he is. He's like 21, going on 47. So,
in fairness, if he was at Georgia, you'd kind of like, you just kind of expect a certain level of play, and it's like, and he'd be blocked by Georgia's offensive line and have Georgia's weapons around him. So you just have a little bit different expectation for him.
Yeah, but still a lot of talent. Like, he's still a former 5-star. And it's not like he's a 5-star like DJU who flamed out at his first stop. You know what I mean? Like, he's a 5-star that still just hasn't even had a chance to show what he is. So I think if you're a Kentucky fan, that's what has you most excited, is that like He still had, it was a 5-star for a reason. And there's nothing we've seen on tape to say otherwise. Like, we don't know. Like, if he is a 5-star guy, like, he might be the most talented Kentucky quarterback in our lifetime, Matt Green. Like, these guys just don't come across very often. Like, I understand the Tim Couches of the world are there, the Jared Lorenzens, the what was it, Woodson? Was it Andre Woodson? What was his name?
Yeah,
quarterback
Andre
who's pretty
Wilson.
good. Yeah, he was pretty good.
That
But
was the best one for my money. Obviously, Tim Couch was the number 1 pick, but Andre Woodson, he was a baller. That was probably the most success they ever had.
that's probably true.
They got to number 2 that year.
Yeah. But I think it's actually losing Liam Cohen and their new OC coming in from Boise State, Bush Hamden. That kind of stinks because, like, Brock came in for Liam, who then takes the OC job with the Bucks. So I don't even know if it's like a Brock situation here. Like, the main character to me is like, what does this offense look like with the Boise State offensive coordinator versus what it was going to be with Liam Cohen running that pro style stuff. So I'm very curious what that looks like. So for me, week over week, the main character I think is going to be like, if Brock struggles, you're like, well, would he have struggled if Liam Cohen had not left after he had committed and transferred? Like, if he had gotten a full season under Liam Cohen, what does this Kentucky offense look like? Like, because they've got some good dudes at receiver. I think they're going to be okay there, but we just don't know. Like, I'm very curious what this guy looks like calling plays for Kentucky. And it feels like it's been a revolving door, and Kentucky cannot they just can't get Liam Cohen to stay as an OC for just two to three consecutive years, man. Mark Stoops is like going to the Kentucky board and everybody else in the NIL, like, I just need a blank check. I need Liam Cohen to stay here for 3 years so I can develop some sort of consistency on offense, because you're having to change things so much, like I kind of feel bad for him.
It's like the Parks and Rec, that accounting firm that just really loved Ben Wyatt, and he could work there anytime he wanted, and then he just kept leaving. I'll tell you one thing.
That's Liam Cohen at Kentucky.
The Kentucky fans it's going to be a Jake Fromm Little League World Series level of media coverage this year. Every single game, we gotta have to set an over-under on how many times it's mentioned Brock Vandegrift, the former 5-star from Georgia. It's going to be mentioned, I don't know how, at least once every single game. Like, he's going to make a great throw, and that's why this guy was a 5-star when he went to Georgia. It's going to be exhausting by the end of the season if you're a Kentucky fan. Just be ready for it.
I like it. Next up, they're not in the East, but we're going to throw them in to break things up here. The Texas Longhorns, Matt Green. As you know, everyone's most important game going into this fall, as we saw on twitter.com this week, everyone's got Texas circled as the most important game this fall for their respective schools. Your main character for the Texas Longhorns this fall will be who?
It's kind of circled for a different reason, though. It's like it kind of is the biggest game on a lot of teams' schedule, but it's almost like because they're new to the SEC and everyone wants to have that welcome to the SEC type moment, like you're the one that, you were dominating that conference, but it's not going to cut it in the SEC. Everyone wants that moment. So it is going to be a little bit special. And Texas fans are loud. They're cocky. So you want to try to shut them up, but
they've won a lot of titles recently, Matt Green. What can you say? They just can't stop winning.
Exactly. So we'll see. We'll see what happens year one in the SEC. Wouldn't be a good look for all we talk in the SEC if they just came in and won at year one. But I think the main character for Texas this year is CJ Baxter. I think you look at what Texas offense was last year, and obviously Quin Ewers, this all those receivers they had, it was a very dynamic passing game. But I felt like the running game was underlooked. Like, you look at Jonathan Brooks last year, like he was on his way to winning the Doak Walker Award. For my money, he was the best running back in college football before he went down with injury. And so I think he was the one that was really kind of the balancing act on that offense, was the fact that you had this dominant running game to go with how dynamic the passing game was. And CJ Baxter, former number 1 running back in the country, like, you saw him have a couple big games after Brooks went down. And who's the other? Blue, I think is his last name. The other running back, I think, even had a 100-yard performance after Brooks went down. So these guys were really productive last year after Brooks got hurt. But I think if CJ Baxter is actually like that premier running back like Jonathan Brooks was, I think that's what this Texas offense is going to need this year, because Quin Ewers, as good as he's been, we were just talking about it on the start of the show. Like, people were predicting Arch Manning is going to be the quarterback. Like, he has missed time both years. It only missed like one game last year, right? But is at least like 2 or 3 in year one. So he's a guy who's obviously missed some time, and they're definitely like, those are going to be some tough receivers and the top tight end to replace from a year ago. So I think this running game for Texas is going to be huge next year.
I think it's a good call. I'm totally fine with that. I do think for me, it's still Quin Ewers, and you're already seeing Paul Feinbaum throwing out the Arch Manning stuff. Like, we don't see many 5-star quarterbacks like this just sit for 2 years and are good with it, this, that, and the other. But it's smart, because it's like, if Arch has one good year as a starter his junior year at Texas next year, he can go to the draft and he can go number 1. Like, it doesn't actually matter. You don't need 2 years of tape. Like, Anthony Richardson had very like, it just doesn't matter. Like, you don't, like, the tape is not actually that necessary for
your name's Manning.
Yeah. And I just wonder with Quin, because we talked about it at the top of this show, I like Quin Ewers a lot. Quin Ewers has to stay healthy all the year. Like, for Texas to ultimately, I think, get to their goals, like, Texas fans and everyone else you need to hope for Quin Ewers, because I think it's asking a lot for Arch to just come in and guide this thing and then win 3 consecutive playoff games to win a title. Because here's the thing, Texas is rightfully in the tier 1 of title contenders. They're right there with Georgia, right there with Ohio State, right there with Oregon. Like, I think it's hard to make a case for any of those 4 teams not being in the top 4 going into this year. They need all 4 of their quarterbacks to stay healthy. That includes Dylan Gabriel. That includes Carson Beck. You can feel good about your backups. You can feel good about Arch. You can feel good about Gunnar Stockton or Jaden Rashada. You can feel good about Dante Moore. But, like, you need your starters to be healthy to win a title. Like, these guys need to be healthy for the full year. So I think Quin Ewers, the main character, is like keeping him healthy. Like, Quin's got to prove it, and it's a longer season now. That's the other part of it. Is like, Quin has to stay healthy longer, because he's going to take more hits. He's gonna be in more big games. Like, it's just, the microscope is going to be closer on Quin Ewers. I like Quin Ewers a lot. I think he can win the Heisman, but he's gonna have to prove it. Like, he is the ultimate. Like, if he can just stay on the field, Texas can win the title. But that's the main character story week over week with Texas, is like, how healthy is Quin Ewers, and that might be the difference between Texas winning a title or not.
Like, let's not pretend that this guy has been like the best quarterback in college football when healthy. Like, he's still left a little bit like to be desired. Like, 2 years, he's thrown 37 touchdowns and 12 picks. Like, that's good, but like 2 years, like, that's, less than 20 touchdowns a season, right, as a starter. So, he's been good. This team was really good a year ago. I think the defense and running game is a little kind of underrated for how important that was to their success last year. But he's obviously a great player. But man, and for our video game players out there, you're absolutely screwed if Ewers goes down, because Arch Manning's not even on the game. So I don't even know what you're gonna do in that situation.
No. Well, a couple more here, Matt Green. The South Carolina Gamecocks, your main character of the season for them is who?
I got to go Rocket Sanders, the Arkansas transfer. I feel like this guy's forgotten about how good he was at Arkansas a couple years ago. And you also just look at this team on offense. Like, obviously, you're losing Spencer Rattler, but Xavier Legette was close to 40% of their receiving production last year. Oh man, I'm blanking on. Is it CJ Anderson? No, Mario Anderson. Is that the running back? That transferred to Memphis. Like, that's like 70% of their running production from a year ago. And
I think that's right. Mario Anderson. Yes, that's correct.
Starting running backs going to Memphis. It's just like, I don't even know what to think as a South Carolina fan. But I think Rocket Sanders, if he can just channel, was it 2022? The year he was so good, I think he had like 1,400 yards rushing.
Mm-hmm.
I think he should be the best player on this offense. But man, there's not a lot of bright spots, or definitely not a lot of proven points for this South Carolina offense coming into 2024.
I like the Rocket Sanders part of it. I'm concerned about South Carolina's chances in 2024 if Rocket Sanders is the main character, because like it's asking a lot. I think for Rocket to kind of carry this thing. I'm curious what it looks like without Spencer Rattler under center. We'll see what the offensive line looks like, because that's going to be a big part of what Rocket Sanders can do for South Carolina this year. Is that offensive line's got to be better, because it was brutal last year. So that needs to be cleaned up. But for me, the main character, I'm going to throw out a coach here. It's my only head coach on the list. It's Shane Beamer, because it's been up and down. Like, he obviously played Georgia really well last year. He beat Tennessee. There's been that back and forth with South Carolina and Tennessee. They don't play each other this year. I think both sides would have liked to play one more time here. But that's not what happened. Like, South Carolina, they have a tough schedule. And I'm very curious how hot of a seat Shane Beamer is on, because I don't have a read. Like, Billy Napier, it seems like we have a good read on what just what he has to do. Because, I mean, it's just brutal. We know we don't have to talk about Florida's schedule. We will, even though we will be talking about Florida after this. But it's right away here for South Carolina. The reason Shane Beamer is circled so high is, like, Old Dominion's a good team. Old Dominion's coming in South Carolina. I think that's going to be a game. That's like one that no one's going to pay attention to at 4:15 and on August 31st here. But I think they're going to give South Carolina a game. Then you got to go to Kentucky. I don't think you'll be favored there. LSU coming to town. You're not going to be favored there. 2 weeks later, you get Ole Miss at home, at Alabama, at Oklahoma, and then A&M comes to town. Like, South Carolina, man, Shane Beamer has to be the main character, because I don't know what his press conferences are going to be like. I think this is something where it's just, we're in year 4 now. And I think this has potential to be the worst year at South Carolina for Beamer, unfortunately. And I think a lot of it's not even really his fault, but I am concerned week over week how this is going to go, because there are a lot of tough games at the beginning of this calendar for South Carolina. And if they're off to a terrible start, and I think you're looking at, I think they're going to have 6 losses by November. That, I don't know, like, how hot of a seat is Shane Beamer on if that's the case, right? Like, I don't know. For me, this is the one I can't escape, is Shane Beamer, because he is going to be under just the hottest of seats, I think, based on this schedule. And I think everybody is so focused in on Florida's schedule that they're overlooking that South Carolina. I'm having to squint really hard to see a scenario where the Gamecocks are in good shape going into November.
But do you honestly think Shane Beamer could get fired this year? In 3 years, they went 7-6, 8-5. He's had one losing season at 5-7. I don't think at South Carolina that's hot seat material.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. But here's what you're seeing: 5-7 last year. I think they're going to be worse. Like, do you pull the trigger if you are worse than 5-7 this year in a increasingly more difficult conference? Like, I don't know.
Well, I have a fun fact here for you, sir. I happen to know for a fact they are not going to fire him this year, because at South Carolina, you have to have 3 losing seasons to get fired.
Oh,
let's go back, sir. We got Jim Morrison, 1983 to 1988. Scratch that. He didn't get fired. We're going to the next one. Sparky Woods, 1989. Great name, by the way. Sparky Woods, 1989 to 1993. Started 6-4-1, then 6-5, then 3 straight losing seasons. Got fired. Then Brad Scott right after him in the 90s. 7-5, 4-6, 6-5, 5-6, 1-10. Third losing season in 5 years. Got fired. Then you obviously had the Lou Holtz and Steve Spurrier years. Those guys were the best they've ever had and retired. Then you go to Will Muschamp. Started 6-7. That's his first losing season. Had the 9-4, 7-6, and then after 4-8 and 2-8, that was his third losing season. He got fired. So I think You look at South Carolina historically, you get at least 3 losing seasons. I guess you get at most 3 losing seasons also. So you get that 3rd losing season. I think that's what does it for Shane Beamer. But to this point, I feel like they've overachieved. And even last year, like, obviously, who would have thought that Georgia, like, after playing Georgia tough, that you miss a bowl game? Like, obviously, that's not a good look. And shoot, the Georgia game came down to the reason they didn't make a bowl game. But I just feel like at South Carolina, I don't necessarily know what the expectations are, but I don't think you can really say that Shane Beamer has underachieved to this point. Like, if they followed up with a 4-8, it's going to be hot going into 2025. But I think he's safe regardless this year.
I don't even think they're going 4-8. I think that's best case scenario. I think this is a 3-9 schedule.
No, it's definitely possible. But also, I guess what you're talking about, Shane Beamer, like being the main character, it's kind of like Dan Mullen. Like, Dan Mullen started with like linear like improvement. Like, what, 10-3 year 1, 11-2 year 2, beat Georgia, win the East year 3, and then one bad season and he's gone. But it's because of who Dan Mullen is, and it's because of like the press conference stuff he did, and like the different, just like his like character and like his just kind of personality that people didn't mesh with. That's, I think, kind of the X factor, like you're saying, Shane Beamer being the main character, is that does he have a meltdown and during one of these press conferences and say something he can't take back, or
that's what I'm saying. Is I think these are going to be some testy press conferences. Yeah, because he's going to get asked. Yeah,
go ahead.
Well, I just think he's going to get asked about his job security a lot this fall. Like, I think he's going to get asked about, do you think you're going to be able to turn this thing around? Do you think, what's the problem? Why is South Carolina losing? It's like you said, like, I don't think it's really his fault, but I'm raising an eyebrow at how this is all going to go. Remember, Will Muschamp in year 5 at South Carolina here in 2020, he started 2-5. That's when they fired Muschamp. It went to Bobo, Matt Green. I think they're going to be 2-5 out of the gate here this year. South Carolina doesn't have a 3-9 season since 2015, Steve Spurrier's last year, when he quit and retired in the middle of the year. It's actually the point of no return, is that kind of start for South Carolina coaches. Lou Holtz last year, 6 wins, but he was 5-7, 5-7 the previous 2. I think if Shane Beamer doesn't overachieve this year, I think we're in the final of either this year or next year is it for Beamer's tenure in South Carolina. Don't you? Do you see Beamer being the coach in 2026? Because I don't.
No, I think that's definitely that's when it's going to be a conversation for sure next year. But also, to your point, kind of off the same same type thing as Dan Mullen, that you could probably speak to even better. It could feel a little like Butch Jones. Like Butch Jones on the field results is not necessarily like a fireable offense. Like, he had the 2 9-win seasons back to back, a 7-6 season, and then it was 1 losing season and he's gone. But it was because, say that again.
He lost to Vanderbilt.
Well, of course, but it was just the vibe. It was like him scolding the reporter, like, what are we doing here? Are you trying to help the program? You're trying to hurt the program. Like, it's just like, I don't know, man, your season's not going well. It's my job to talk about how your season's going. Like, sorry, not sorry. So I think it was like his personality, and it felt like, okay, this job feels like it's too big for him. Like, it was just the vibes of it. And so I wouldn't be surprised, like you're saying, if Shane Beamer does something that's kind of like, okay, I'm not sure this guy's cut out for this job, even if the win-loss record actually isn't that bad through 3 years.
For sure. Florida here, speaking of coaches on the hot seat here, your main character for the Florida Gators this fall will be who, Matt Green?
Okay, sir, this is my hot take. This is the one I've been waiting on. The main character for the Florida Gators, sir, is DJ Lagway. That is going to be what their season is measured on, because this Florida season is not going to go well, but I feel like it's going to be maybe like a Desmond Ridder situation with Arthur Smith. Like, he's not playing the whole season, and then at the end of the year, Desmond Ridder showed some signs. Maybe we'll hold on to him next year. Obviously, I think most people prefer DJ Lagway be better than Desmond Ridder, but I think we're going to see a situation of maybe Florida starts, maybe they start decent, maybe they're 3-3 or something, and there's nothing really to play for. And then it's like, okay, let's get that future quarterback in there. Maybe in some games, Lagway kind of, creates a buzz, and then all of a sudden they just put him in the starting lineup. And we start to see maybe Florida goes 5-7 next year, but by the last 2 or 3 games of the season, it's like, okay, this guy looks like he could be a star. And I think that's the type of thing that could save Billy Napier's job, is like, okay, it was another bad season. It was a 3rd losing season in a row, but I feel like we got our star quarterback that could take us to the next level. Maybe Napier's all right. Maybe the SEC got harder. Maybe we need to adjust our expectations a little bit. Maybe it's going to take a little longer than we thought to get back up there. But I think having a quarterback that looks like a star, I think that can go a long way for a fan base and kind of just the overall temperature of the program. And I think that's what's going to happen. Like, Graham Mertz doesn't feel like the kind of guy that's going to be bad enough to lose the job. But I feel like, just one of those situations, maybe it's not the quarterback's fault, but you're like, after a few games, you're like, the offense is stale. Like, something just needs to change just for the sake of change. And Lagway comes in and you see the offense go to another level. I think and then just the promise of the future, I think, will be like the silver lining on maybe a it'll be a 4th straight season that they would have. No, they did make a bowl game, but they ended up with a losing record. So the 2nd straight year.
They got shut out in that bowl game by Oregon State, right?
Yeah, that was 2022.
I think they had a kick. What did they celebrate? The made field goal. What happened? What did they do? Wasn't there a weird
I don't
tweet
know. They've
celebrating?
had a really long streak of not getting shut out. Like,
that's what it is.
Like
yes,
the 80s or 90s. Like a couple of those Georgia blowouts, like 2017 and maybe one a couple years ago. They've like gotten a 4th quarter touchdown and like celebrated it.
That's what it was. Goodness gracious. I'm going to zag here, Matt Green. Like I said, I think people are all zoning in, and I understand the schedule for Florida. They're zoning in on Florida as the 3-9 disaster, Billy Napier losing his job team. I just talked about the one who I'm zagging on. It's South Carolina. I think South Carolina is the team who actually has the season from hell. Is my guess right now, as we sit here now on July 1st. I don't think it's going to be Florida, Matt Green. And Eugen Wilson is one of the reasons. He's my main character for the Florida Gators this fall. He's a former 5-star. He's going to his sophomore year. He was really good in the Utah game. I don't know if you remember right out of the gate. He is a do-it-all Swiss Army knife. Like, I don't know if he's Percy Harvin. Like, those guys just don't come around very often. But he's a 5-star for a reason. Like, I think people need to understand. Eugen Wilson, in 10 games, he had 7 starts last year. He finished with a team high, 6 touchdowns. He was 2nd on the team in receptions and only 7 starts with 61, 538 receiving yards. He ran the ball well. Like, he's someone who can be used in so many different ways. Like, if he's healthy for a full year, I think Eugen Wilson's going to be really, really good for Florida. And Graham Mertz is the type of quarterback where it's like, he's not going to throw picks. Just get the ball in Eugen Wilson's hands. Like, keep him on the field. Eugen Wilson, I think, is actually one of the most talented receivers in the conference going into this year. So for me, I'm pretty, I think he's a main character where if Florida gets off to some early success, I think a lot of it is because Eugen Wilson and this offense is exceeding expectations. And I think Eugen Wilson could be the next really big time, do-it-all Swiss Army knife kind of skill position guy. So I'm pretty high on Eugen Wilson. So he's my main character. Matt Green.
Yeah, I like that. He was like the scariest weapon on their offense a year ago. As good as Pearsall is, he didn't terrify you. Like,
Pearsall was good.
He's
just not a number one. Yeah.
Eugen Wilson's a game changer. Like, the way just the yards after catch ability, just he's a dynamic athlete. I think he just kind of scares you, kind of takes the top off a little differently than Pearsall.
For sure. Reverses, this, that, and the other. I think Eugen Wilson is just going to be a really good player at Florida. All that being said, they're only 2.5-point dogs at home against Miami to kick things off. I think people are penciling in Miami and Mario Cristobal to just walk into the swamp and win this game. I think they're getting a little ahead of themselves. Like I've talked about in our predictions and stuff.
Pretty close.
Huh?
2.5's pretty close.
That's what I'm saying. And I think people have just penciled in Miami and have penciled in that like Florida's going to have this terrible season. The schedule doesn't start that horrible for Florida, Matt Green. Like it's tough, but you get Sanford at home. I think there's a very real chance that they beat Miami to kick things off. Like I'll believe Florida loses it at home when I see it against Miami. You get A&M with a new coach at home in week 3. They might be favored there. So then you're looking at 3-0 for Florida, building momentum. You go to Mississippi State, which I understand is hard sometimes to play. They're going to be favored. Jeff Lebby, year 1, Blake Shapen's their quarterback. They might be a disaster this first year at Mississippi State. That's a very winnable game for Florida. Then they get UCF. We talk about like them having to play all the Florida schools. Well, they play 2 of them at home. Like that's huge for them to get UCF at home. So we talked about in last week's pod that Ben Hill Griffin Stadium is one of the most difficult places to play when Florida's good. I think early on, this place is going to be bumping because Florida has not gone, the losses haven't racked up. They're not losing steam in that regard.
That's the better way to say it. Before the season's gone bad, it's a difficult place to play. I think a lot of those early season road games are a lot tougher than people kind of think. Like, what was it? North Carolina went Virginia Tech season opener a couple years ago when they were like preseason top 10 and got upset. I just think going on the road, everyone's got that hope that this year could be the year. The fan base, there's no negativity week 1.
No. And look, like the back end, I will agree, from Tennessee on is brutal for Florida. But I don't know. I think people who are just like, 3-9 or it's going to be a disaster in the 3.5. I think there's a chance Florida's undefeated going to Neyland. And I hope that's not the case because I don't want any part of undefeated Florida coming in to Tennessee in mid-October, which is going to be weird that it's this late in the season that they're playing the Gators at Tennessee. But after that, like if you want to tell me that it's going to be a disaster after, because you get Kentucky at home, at Georgia in Jacksonville, at Texas, LSU at home, Ole Miss at home, and then at Florida State, like you're just not going to find a tougher back end of the schedule anywhere in the country. Like that's the toughest, no question.
I don't know where these rankings are coming from. I'm looking on FBSschedules.com and they got a little number next to everybody. They have Kentucky 23, Miami 24, and A&M 25. I don't know what rankings have that, but if their rankings are correct, that's 9 ranked teams on Florida's schedule. But the crazy part is Miami is at home, A&M is home, Kentucky is home, LSU is home, Ole Miss is home, Florida or Georgia is not on the road, is a neutral site. Yeah. So it's kind of unfortunate if you're a Florida fan, because it feels like, I mean, other than the fact that this is Napier's job potentially on the line, that it might be as good as this super difficult schedule could get, if that's the silver lining, I guess. But yeah, it's maybe some of those home games it can bounce their way, and that could at least set them up for not being as disappointed when they lose 4 or 5 of their final 6 games. But I don't know. It could be the DJ Lagway show. So don't sleep on that.
Final one here, Matt Green. You've been spending the weekend getting ready to talk Vanderbilt football here to close things up as their main character in 2024 in the college football season. Do you not have one, Matt Green, for the Vandy Commodores?
I'm gonna say it's Barton Simmons, the GM of the squad over there. No, I really just don't know what to expect from Vanderbilt this year. Well, you're a big Tennessee guy. Give me the Nashville scoop.
Well, you mentioned Barton Simmons. Here's the thing, and I was looking today at because Tennessee just went in this past week and got Marion Dye from Indiana. He was the number 1 player in the state of Indiana on the edge. So he'll pretty exciting, pretty big get for Tennessee in this 2025 class. Purdue really wanted him, and you look at it, you're like, I was looking at the blue chippers currently at Purdue and in this class, and it's brutal again. But hey, they hired Graham Harrell. Like they're running the air raid, they're doing that. They're making the best of it. I don't think I just cannot believe we're in 2024 and like Vanderbilt and Northwestern, I guess you could at least sell me on, because Pat Fitzgerald did have a lot of success at Northwestern and got more out of the guys that he had at Northwestern on the football field than I think most coaches would be able to in the win-losses column. But I just look at this and I'm like, Bandy, with Texas and Oklahoma coming in here, I like Clark Lee. I think he's a good defensive mind. Like, he'd be a good defensive coordinator at Tennessee. I don't know what we're doing here. Like, I don't know. Like, Diego Pavia, like, he might be good. He beat Auburn at Auburn with New Mexico State last year. He's the most fun Vanderbilt quarterback option they've had in a long time. He runs the ball well. I think that'll be interesting. He was not accurate in the bowl game when they got blown out by Fresno, 11 to 25, 58 yards. But in his last 3 games, with Liberty, Jacksonville State, and Auburn, he completed nearly 70% of his passes, average yards per attempt, 7.2, 7.9, 11.8, 7 TDs, 2 picks in those final 3. He finished strong at New Mexico State. I don't know what's possible for him at Vanderbilt. They lost a lot of guys in the portal again this cycle. Your London Humphreys is there. Will Shepard left to, I forgot where Will Shepard is. But I think he's at Colorado. And look, you got to run the triple. You got to run the air raid. You got to run something like this pro style stuff and just bringing in Diego. Maybe he's a little bit fun, but I don't understand how when you have the talent that you have, you're getting killed in the portal the way you are, the academic restraints there. Sorry, you've got to run the triple or you've got to run the air raid. No, sorry, you're hiring Steve Spurrier Jr., who ran with Mike Leach over there at Mississippi State a little bit. I don't care. You have to do something else. You can't do this because they're going into another year where they're just going to line up and just get obliterated from the line of scrimmage, and it's just gonna be another brutal year. I just feel like for Vanderbilt. I don't know. I can't believe that they're still going about things the way they are offensively, because I don't think it's a winning formula. I don't think you can win this way at Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like Northwestern at least had like a history of like doing some having those hard-nosed teams playing 2 yards in a cloud of dust or whatever. I mean, Kentucky was basically Vanderbilt, right? Like in like the 90s or 80s, like they were terrible until they decided like, hey, let's just have fun. Let's just throw that thing around 50 times a game.
I was gonna say they brought in Hal Mummy and Mike Leach and everybody, and that changed the whole course of their program.
Exactly. So that would be something different. Like at least Vanderbilt, at the very least, would be a team that you don't want to prepare for. But yeah, like sneaky good home schedule this year too for Vanderbilt. Is there stadium renovations done?
Going to good question. Well, Northwestern just started. Have you seen where Northwestern's playing for the next 2 years?
Yeah, it's like basically a practice field right on the lake, right?
Yeah, it's something, man. Like it's gonna be wild to see that up close on a broadcast.
Like 10,000? Like how?
It's
it
small.
Didn't look very big.
Yeah, it's going to be smaller than even what we saw with Hawaii the last couple of years. I don't know if you saw what Hawaii was playing in and all that, but yeah,
that's
it's going
cool.
to be small.
That little coastal breeze coming in Hawaii. I don't think anyone wants that Lake Michigan coming in November.
I love the idea of like these joggers though, like jogging by, like getting their afternoon run in, and like that's on the broadcast because of how the stadium is. Like this is a Big Ten broadcast, so it's like Northwestern Michigan, and you just have like someone having a picnic like on the like you can see them over by the water. It's going to be really, really bizarre.
It definitely is. I mean, why can't they play in like the Bears Stadium for a year?
Yeah, because isn't that what Kansas is doing? Aren't they playing at the Chiefs Stadium?
Embarrassing if they're just like 10% capacity of Soldier Field or something. I don't know, but I mean, I remember the Bears played at Illinois. I remember early 2000s when they were having the renovations to Soldier Field, but I don't know. Something is better than. I mean, it looks kind of cool, like the novelty of just seeing it, but it's like this is Big Ten football? Are we serious?
It's supposed to be the 2 big premier programs or big premier conferences here, and we got that. Well,
Vanderbilt's got Alabama, Texas, and Tennessee all in Nashville this year. So we'll see.
Right.
They get to avoid Georgia this year, and they also go at Georgia State, so they'll be in Turner Field. What I'll always call Turner Field. I want to say Center Park Stadium, Georgia State.
What Panthers. Is it called?
It's called Center Park Stadium. which I think
I
is like
never
a
would've guessed
brand
that.
name. Like I think it's like it looks like a bank logo. I don't know what it is, but it's not like it's definitely some sort of corporate sponsor.
Well, that's all I've got, Matt Green. But thank you as always, good sir. We'll do the West next week here on the show, and then we'll I think get into our conference previews, our conference preview series and predictions and all that kind of stuff. Because like you said, we're in talking season, and it's about that time to dive into the books and be ready to go for this college football season.
So is Oklahoma an unofficial member of the West? Is that how we're?
Yeah, I'm just putting them in the West.
Is Texas further west than Oklahoma? Is Texas further west and further east than Oklahoma? It
question.
definitely goes further west. El Paso and all that. That's definitely further west. I think they do.
At a map right now.
I think they do go further west and further east.
Okay, I'm right. Yeah, Texas goes further east. I was correct. And Texas also goes further west. But hey, yeah. I'm going further east. That's where I was starting. I thought Texas was closer to the east than Oklahoma, but hey.
You got Austin and Norman. You got those coordinates pulled up. We'll see what we can find.
Yeah. Matt Green, always a pleasure. I'll talk to you next week.
Yes, sir.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.